I'm super excited to be here and really share my journey, really as a career B2B tech marketer with almost 30 years of experience. My goal for today was really just to have a conversation with you all and share what I've observed over the last 6 to 9 months, what I've learned, what I've been playing with using AI in my daily life as a marketer who has been in transition, from a full-time, career working in B2B tech to doing my own thing and also building a product. So, I was going to say that the thing about today is that it's going to be a dialogue, obviously. I am by no means an expert in AI. I have a bit of probably imposter syndrome because every day I feel like there's 10 things that I don't know versus the one thing that I did learn. And I'm reassured by a friend who kind of says, "Hey, hold on, Kenny. Like, there is no there is no CMO who's been a marketer in 2026. And so we're all trying to figure this out. We're all trying to learn. We're all like, nobody has the answers or crystal ball. And I think a lot of the benefit is having communities like this get together and have these conversations. And so that's my goal for today. Quick background just on me. Almost 30 years of B2B experience in what I would say like big tech at Adobe, Twitter, Zendesk, medium tech, Seismic, Lithium, did some consulting at Segment Twilio, and then I ran startups, at companies like Revinate, Dynamic Signal, and I was super early at SoFi. Most of these roles were senior director, VP of marketing roles in probably what I would say are three categories of marketing. All of you know that there's many different cuts of marketing, and I would say that my background or my core background is probably three pillars: classic product marketing, modern demand generation, and then global integrated campaigns. And we could probably have a conversation about how that's all evolved, how that works together with the sales and customer success motion. But I'm going to cut to the chase and say that what I'm doing today, because I left my last job about just over a year ago, I left my last job, Seismic, as their VP of revenue marketing. And what I'm doing today is really getting all immersed in AI, and I've been consulting and advising for early stage companies. I'm advising and working with two companies right now. One of them is getting my hands dirty and really learning how to be a GTM engineer. If you heard that whole thing from Sam Altman saying that there's going to be a future one person $1 billion startup, I'm not sure how far away we are from that. But I certainly was curious about, oh man, in my experience in marketing and looking at all the different teams and functions and silos, can I learn a lot about marketing as a product marketer, demand gen marketer, campaign marketer, look at this new world of AI tools that have come out, and how much can I do on my own? And part of that was, can I be a GTM engineer, right? And at some level. So I've been playing around with that, and I'll share my experiences. But I also kind of fell into building a product using AI. And as being in Silicon Valley, you have a lot of friends who are engineers or product manager friends, people who are technical agency people. I reconnected with a friend of mine and we were battering around ideas. And he kind of said, look, for the last 2 years, I've been learning the fundamentals of engineering and let's build something. And I had this idea of effectively what I'll say right now is a B2B product that was focused on the second home market. I am not solving a first world problem. um, what I'm trying to solve for is how do you make it easier for people to be generous for those who have second homes to share it with their friends and family. I'm not talking Airbnb or a VRBO concept, but this is actually an example where let's just say, Linda, you inherit a home from your parents in wine country, the mortgage is paid off, and you just want to share it with your friends and family. How do you make that a easy turnkey process? So we're trying to figure out how to solve that problem right now. All of this is in the spirit of learning while playing. And this is where I think I am right now in my at the stage in my life and career. And I'm trying to make a go out of it. And I'm going to caveat and say that if none of this works out, the easy fallback, or not so easy fallback maybe, is to go back to a corporate job. So this is where I am. So I wanted to actually share. There's four things I'll actually share that I've learned or just observed, as I mentioned. I've spent a lot of time in the last 6 months attending conferences like Hard Skills Exchange, going to Martech Day, AIX for marketing. There's so many activities. Next week I'm going to the Databricks Marketing Summit as an example, and so you get to learn a lot, meet a lot, and what I would say is I've summarized four key observations that I'll outline. The first one is the market's moving really fast. I know this is Captain Obvious stuff, but it really feels like every day there's a new AI tool or there's an incumbent that has a brand new feature. And just trying to understand the landscape is really challenging, right? I think we're all in this same boat. And the easiest example I'll give you, and this is from Scott Brinker, who I'm sure all know, who creates the State of Martech report. Over 15,384 apps right now, right? Huge, huge space, and it's still growing, is what he's saying. I was at a conference where Carol Lou Dietrich, who was the CMO of Atlassian, she had this really interesting analogy, and I'll share it with you. And her analogy was, think of Tech 1.0, where you had the Oracles, the Siebels, the SAPs, like that, that market, they captured a horizontal market, and they captured a lot of that value by going horizontal because they were probably one of the few players in town that was able to capture all of that. So in the classic shape of a T, that top part was wide. The stem of the T, that vertical part was pretty shallow. In Tech 2.0, she said, look, companies like Salesforce came along, right? So they captured a large part of that market still, but that T was shrinking a little bit. But then you started actually seeing more vertical players come about, right? Companies like Viva that, for example, did CRM for pharmaceutical, right? That started to fill out. And her premise was you're going to see in Tech 3.0 that horizontal T continue to shrink, where you might get some players like Cursor that are capturing that value across a horizontal market, but then this really long tail, or sorry, this long vertical where there's a lot more custom solutions based off of industry, based off of role and things like that. And I thought that was a pretty interesting point. I'm like, yeah, I could see that because with AI, people are creating solutions that are very niche solutions, right? And this is where you hear the riches are in the niches, and everyone starts there and then tries to then expand from that. This slide, same slide from Martech Day, also hit it for me because the visual represented a lot of what my friends and my colleagues at previous companies were going through in terms of, okay, how are you adopting AI, right? When I left Seismic a year ago, the CMO had a mandate to say, hey, look, we've got to get all over this. Like each department, tell me what your challenges are. We'll review it, and then we'll look and see actually the viability of it and start testing things. When I think about this where Seismic is today, right? I'll just give you an example. They were a company. We had Zoom Info for a database, right? Like many companies do. We were using 6sense for scoring and for doing some degree of account based, right? Also, 6sense was being used to fuel our lead scoring model as well. We were also using Drift for our chatbot experience, right? And then we had these individual campaigns that we would run. We would do all these things, get to an MQL or an MQA, and throw it over the fence to an SDR where they didn't really understand the context history of that person. They just fired off their outreach sequence or their sales loft sequence, right? And they just started trying to get a meeting to then, once they get a meeting, hand that off to a salesperson. They have similar challenges today still, but they're now trying to figure out, okay, should we be using 6sense conversational AI, right? But if they do implement that, how does that actually connect with a better SDR conversion experience, right? Because you can build better AIs that are more tailored and relevant. But if I throw that email or that record over to an SDR, how do they connect what that person or that record did and what they engaged and connected on so that there's even more relevant conversation? That wasn't really happening. So what I started seeing, and this is where I'll kind of say that as I've been consulting, pretending to be a GTM engineer, and this is on a much smaller scale, smaller people, less tape to go through. I'm replicating some of those features. So I've been using technology like Clay, and Clay is a hot new company that allows you to basically identify your database or like figure out your audience and allows you to then quickly build an audience list. You can buy credits to actually make sure that the contact information is correct. And then I use that then to run campaigns in a tool called Unify. And what I'm using Unify for is the ability for me to create hyper relevant email sequences that I can drive to different actions like my website, an event, or things like that. So now I'm able to work much faster and quickly, albeit on a much smaller scale. But this is an example for me of just some of the things that I've been doing to figure out how do I actually, leverage AI to, drive an action for my audiences. So still early stages, but this is just an example of how I've been trying to use different technologies and also seeing how my colleagues from companies that I've been at also leverage AI in different ways, and it's still generally all across the board. So the next thing that I would say as an observation is that we're also in a place where we're in a new phase where tools are now routing, enriching, and adapting to certain processes. And I kind of say it's a phase where we're moving from tasks and processes to workflows and outcomes. So in the example I gave earlier, you buy ZoomInfo because you need a database. And so I would then have this database, but now I need to figure out, well, what campaign do I want to run to this audience or this database that I have? There are some people that might have heard about us. There are others that have never heard of us. There are people that have engaged and then they've actually left. They all can require different types of messages and campaigns. And so what ideally you want to do is say, I want to look at this audience, I want to segment this audience, and then run different types of marketing campaigns so that you're ultimately trying to figure out how do I deliver the right message to the right audiences via the right channels. And I'll tell you that coming from Zendesk, I led global campaigns for the mid-market segment. That was their largest marketing segment. And when we ran campaigns, we looked at our database. We were using Eloqua at that time. But what we were doing was we said, I want to run this campaign to this audience, and I want to do these things. And because of we had tools that were purpose built for a task, right? It was all task based. And then you would have different teams for different tasks. I want to send this email, so go to the email team. For those people that respond, I want to then talk to the webinar people or the events people, and I want to make sure they get an event. And then I want to actually do something else as a follow-up. And so that coordination based off of the tools were all task-based, but there's a process that you want to take customers through or a journey. And that wasn't available till very recently, where I discovered technology like Growth Loop and Questera. And I haven't played with this yet, but I've gotten basically demos of them. And what I'm seeing is the ability for AI to now actually do degrees of orchestration, right? This is almost like that magical world where, hey, look, I want to understand my database. I want to segment that audience, and then I want to run top of funnel nurture or mid funnel nurture or bottom funnel recouping of lost MQL and opportunities. Double bonus points if my demand gen structure was good enough where I understood where and why people dropped off. So classic example, show me all the people that dropped off at stage one pipeline because there was no budget. Well, how do I run a fast campaign? Companies like Growth Loop and Questera, what they're saying they can do is let us analyze that for you. We'll run automated campaigns based on what you put in, and they're agentic, so they're always running and always improving. And they'll actually make recommendations of what campaigns you want to run, right? When I heard that, it blew my mind. I thought, oh my God, this is insane, right? And this candidly, when I was at Zendesk, you could only run two or three major campaigns because that's what those teams could handle, right? In this new model, the promise of agentic AI being able to run these campaigns at scale and learn from itself and optimize is something that I've been super curious about. And if this is actually too big and whoa, like too much to chew off, I've been looking at a product called Watt AI. They're super early in their development cycle. They're still just taking on they're on a wait list, but that solution is all about look, how do you build content for your brand or product where you might have a goal where you want to build a blog post every week, but you also need a LinkedIn post, you need a few social posts. What AI will do is it will ingest in your brand guidelines, look at the content that's actually that you've built out that's performed best, look at basically what your competitors are also talking about in terms of keywords and things like that, analyze certain channels like YouTube, and then recommend a weekly asset that could then be fragmented out. So this is all early stages, but my point is that this is like the work has all become about orchestrating all of these different actions into these learning loops effectively, and it's learning in itself. So it's been kind of interesting. I would say that from a role perspective, and I put this thing in here from Lisa Adams. You might have heard from her. She does a lot of IP thought leadership around AI for marketing. She talked about how there's a traditional role of growth marketing directors where you manage the campaign, you analyze campaigns manually, you do that coordination between teams, you create a brief, and then you report on what happened. Whereas the new GTM strategy architect is you orchestrate these human AI campaign ecosystems and you're training the AI with insights. You build and create these cross-functional AI workflows. You then build AI teammates, and then you look at how to, pattern recognition, and that's kind of this new evolution. It blew my mind, and she was able to articulate what I was feeling of like, oh my God, this is kind of where it's going. And a couple of people that have talked about this. There's a woman named Katie Srinivasian, and what she had a LinkedIn post last week that I can find and share with you all. But she talked about that. Hey, look, the next generation of marketing leaders are going to know strategy, right? That customer journey and strategy, but then also be able to build AI workflows and be able to actually connect the dots so that what you get are outcomes versus just processes and things like that. And that just made a lot of sense for me. So I'm going to kind of quickly go through here on the last two slides, but the third observation that I have is that no matter what you implement, how you do it, I'm a big believer that the fundamentals still matter. And I've seen it. And what I mean by that is um, you could, for example, build an AI strategy for a customer that sells to mid-market enterprise with group team buying dynamics. But if they insist on, I want volume leads, right? It doesn't really matter, right? Because the fundamentals are you want to market to your customers how they discover, evaluate, learn, try, buy, and use. And you've got to figure out what AI do you use to map to that. This is also why I have a theory that product marketing seems to be making a resurgence or comeback because at the end of the day, from my take, product marketing is all about understanding the customer in a very deep, meaningful way. Product marketing is all about understanding the customer journeys, ICPs, right? They know everything about that customer. And in a world of AI, those are like, you have to know those things so that you can then set an appropriate strategy. And I'm just sharing here a visual that I like from one of my favorite companies, Winning by Design. They had a summit recently. You should go check out their content because they recently are talking about user-led growth, which I completely agree with. But what they're saying here in the slide visual is that all problems, growing can be tracked to either a market problem, a product problem, or a go-to-market problem. And that no matter what you're doing with AI, if you don't have a product that hunts, it doesn't really matter, right? And getting some of that product telemetry back is going to be really important. So you want to make sure you get some of those fundamentals in place first. And so it's one of the things that I think about a lot before I think AI can just easily solve my problem. Um, it's funny, just I'll say that as I was building my own product, in this the B2C product for second homeowners, I did a lot of market research on how big the market opportunity was. I used AI a lot to help me. I used AI to help me understand the competition and help me figure out basically a needs analysis. I actually did about 40 user interviews with second homeowners, compiled all that information from my AI recording solution. I outputted a PRD that I then gave to my co-founder who is building the product now, and so just I wanted to share that as a series of steps and rigor to help me really understand what we were building and what problem we were solving for. And all along the way, even as we were building out feature priorities, we were vetting that against what the market didn't have or what the market had. And so we'll see. So the last thing I'll say is that AI here is not a spectator sport. At the end of the day, you have to be deeply involved. And during the AI for Marketing Summit, Megan Eisenberg, who is the CMO of Samsara, she had this slide I thought was so good because she outlined two things. One is how do you get the organization to be very AI centric or embrace AI? And this is just some of the things that she outlined that she had done and gone through to get her team to embrace a culture of testing, using, piloting AI. I think some of the things that I loved were things like vendor trainings. And I will say that when I was at tech companies, you typically tended to go, oh my God, this person's just trying to get a demo and show this stuff. But now with I think that there's a real opportunity to embrace and see what companies have actually built out and developed and have them in, set up a weekly demo day or have some vehicle to have companies showcase what they're doing. And I think if those companies can tie it to they can make workflows easier or outcomes better, I think they're in a winning position. So I thought this was just a really good outline. The second thing that she showed, and this is more rubber meets the road in terms of how she deployed AI, she outlined all of the core functions of marketing and outlined where AI tooling was being embedded or where they were actively putting it in, where they had planned for it, and then what's up for review. So I'll tell you, the automated campaign orchestration, I'm a fan of Growth Loop and Questera from what I've seen as a demo so far. I'm actually going into Questera's office tomorrow to do a deep dive because they're giving me that opportunity. But this is just a way that I've seen that makes a lot of sense to me of how do you actually adopt or ingest AI into your organization based off of how your setup is. And again, every company is different. I refer back to that technology adoption lifecycle curve where it shows, what stage of maturity you might be in. I know some companies are using pure agents like OneMind today. Others are just using something basic like, an LLM. So just things like that. So those are my four observations and learnings. I guess this is the point, Carrie, where we can take it to a conversation or dialogue, perhaps.